Myself, my name is Ben Truitt. I am the new programs chair for the coming year. So if you have any special requests or ideas for future programs, please reach out to me. You can find my contact information on the cfacolorado.org website. And want to also make you aware of some coming programs that we have coming up this fall. We have an excellent one today, but August 16th, we also have Chester Santos, the memory man, that will be here. We have on September 21st, Andrew Patterson with Vanguard. October 25th, we have Simon Derrick with BNY Mellon. And November 3rd, we have Jim Paulson with Wells Capital Management. Now I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today. Melanie Gray has joined us from 24UNet, which specializes in cybersecurity. And she'll be talking a little bit about cybersecurity and how it impacts your business and what things you should be aware of. And please join me in welcoming Melanie to our event today.
Hello. Get started here. Thanks so much for that introduction. And so, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today on cybersecurity. So, a couple of things. Of course, as I said, I'm Melanie Gray, VP of Sales and Marketing for 24UNet. But don't worry, I'm going to try not to bore you. I don't want you to look like this poor guy by the end. So, don't worry. But we also have, just to let you know, that Dane Gray is available for, this is not going to be a technical discussion, so I'm not going to bore you with bits and bytes and all kind of acronyms that you're not familiar with, so don't worry about that. But however, if you are having a security issue or a technical issue and you want to stay after and discuss directly, Dane is here, is our cybersecurity expert, that he can chat with you about that. So typically, just to set the expectation, typically when I'm speaking to a crowd of this size, we usually fall into 3 categories. So typically there's going to be the analytical group. This group might be a little more analytical than most, but usually about a third of the audience is analytical. They're like, I want some charts, I want some graphs, I want her to show me some numbers that are interesting. And then the second group is usually what's in it for me. What am I going to take away from this? So don't worry, I have some things for you to take away that you can start doing today through cybersecurity. And then the last group, of course, is you want to be entertained. So I promise I'm not a comedian, but I'll do my best. So we're going to take a quick look at the overview of cybersecurity. So right now, enterprises of all sizes are being besieged by cybercrime at an alarming rate. Successful cyber attacks of businesses of all sizes have increased by 144% over a 4-year period. So part of my presentation today is that we're trying to let you know that really the argument that organizations should aim to be more cyber resilient. At the end of the day, you're not only able to repel an attack, but actually you have to be prepared for an actual breach. Yes?
Just out of curiosity, when you see a figure like 148 million, does that mean that the hackers actually took 148, or is that the total cost of recovery and personnel?
Right. So depending on the response from the company, that's an excellent question, and it's interesting that you bring that up. So 148 million. Typically, I don't know specifically on Target's case, but most of the time when you have that data compromised, they're also looking at attorney's fees, how much they've had to pay out for damages, and all of those things. However, if a company is trying to minimize to the public the impact of the breach, they might report a much lower number, which was only the value of the data, but the impact of the breach might have been. And actually, I have a slide coming up that'll address that. So usually, I start with some statistics, and by asking the question and letting you think about it. So let's take a look at this first. So the National Nuclear Security Administration, which is an arm of the Energy Department, records how many attempted hacks each day. So you just think about that for a minute, kind of get a number in your head and see how close you are. Sometimes if I'm with a smaller group, we actually write it down, but we won't have school today. So it's 10 million each day. Yeah. So this usually puts it into perspective. I mean, obviously that's a high-power target, something that they're trying to defend against every day. But that's just one department. Let's take a look at another statistic that's interesting.
That's only one country too, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
It's only one country?
Oh, that's how many attacks. So that's the actual. That's just our National Nuclear Security Administration.
That's the U.S.
And that's just attacks from all over
The world.
all over the world for that department each day, each single day. So here's another one that's very interesting. So actually, non-targeted attacks still make up the majority of malware. So I'm not going to go into all of it, but malware obviously is just a generic term for all of your Trojans, virus, worms. It's just malicious code. It's a very generic term. So how many new pieces of malware were created just last year? And again, to get a number in your head, it's 317 million. So what typically happens on the hackers, they'll change just a bit of code. So once they figure out, this particular malware is working, they'll change just a bit of code. It's a new piece of malware that can infect your system. It's a lotto you don't want to win. Last little piece here. So BitGlass sent around data that included names, addresses, and it was basically 1,568 bits of information. It was just fictitious. It was names, addresses, social security numbers. And at the end of the day, within 2 weeks, the data was viewed more than 1,000 times and downloaded 47 times by how many countries? And so it was 22 countries on 5 continents. And the reason that I bring up this particular statistics is it doesn't matter, even if your company is small. I mean, this was, if you imagine all the information on the internet, there was only 1,600 bits of information here, probably less than your last database import on your leads. And so just putting that small amount of information out there, within 2 weeks it had traveled to 22 countries and 5 continents.
Who is BitGlass?
BitGlass is just another data provider. So the biggest point here is I don't want everyone to get a false sense of security by telling yourself, we actually have clients who originally will have started out saying, I'm too small, no one's interested in my data, who would bother to hack into my system? I don't have anything to take.
So how do they send the data around? Is that through an email, or how? Was it something they publicly posted?
Yeah, they publicly posted it. Yeah. So they actually posted it publicly, and they wanted to see that obviously they had some tags in there so they could see how and where it traveled. And so they were watching the information as it traveled. And they just wanted to see basically how fast, how far, And so it would travel, and it didn't take long, even though obviously some people probably figured out that it was fictitious.
I guess we're asking questions as we go along.
No worries, yeah.
Do most companies self-insure for this damages like Target, or do they get catastrophic, do you know, or is it?
Well, I can talk a little bit about cybersecurity insurance.
Yeah.
So what happens is cybersecurity insurance actually provides, kind of protects you for that last 10% of risk that no one can mitigate for you, because you're never going to have 100% defense on your network. However, you cannot get cybersecurity insurance if you haven't implemented any cybersecurity. So we actually have people that will call us and say, I went out, and as a company, they tried to get cybersecurity insurance, and they were declined because they didn't have any cybersecurity in place. So it's kind of like your house insurance. You still have to...
Is it common, or most people self-insure? Do you think they're big companies probably have an account?
So we have, there are policies, obviously, and we don't sell insurance,
yeah.
But we do help, we do have CISO consulting, and so when we're helping companies, we are looking at different policies, and you can put together policies for the smaller companies. Basically, it's like a portfolio. You're picking and choosing what type of coverage, And interestingly enough, the more cybersecurity you do put in place on your network, the lower your premium can be for your cybersecurity. So, but then again, like I said, if you don't have it in place, you're not going to get cybersecurity. So, but that does help mitigate. So, as to whether Target had it or not, I have no idea. So, and I'm fine with questions during. So, one of the things, so 71% of security breaches actually target small businesses. And the reason for that is time, budget, and expertise. So a lot of companies out there, either they feel they're not going to be a target, or they don't want to invest in cybersecurity. And at the end of the day, if you're not proactive at the time of a disaster, is not the time to try to figure out how you're going to handle it. And that is why, and many of you have heard this statistic, so 66% of breaches aren't discovered for a month or more. Unfortunately, 60% of small businesses actually go out of business within 6 months of a data breach. And a big reason for this, because the other 40% actually prepared. They actually invested in cybersecurity. And a lot of the reasons is that a small business typically can't afford not only the loss of the data, the loss of reputation, and the loss of revenue that it causes. So you have a complete fallout in how it was taken. And so part of what I'm going to tell you today is how you can actually, some things you can do to defend against that, because being proactive is going to help you with hopefully not being the target of a breach. But even if you are, then I'll help you with that too. You know. And speaking of average cost, so you could go to any statistic, or you could come up with, there's so many numbers. One average cost by the IBM and Ponemon Institute, they came up with $750 to $31 million. Obviously, it depends on the size of the data breach and the size of the company. So it's interesting though. So today I'm going to give you 3 fundamental ways that you can protect your network, and one thing you should be doing as a company. But it's interesting to me when a lot of companies don't want to invest in cybersecurity defenses, because every one of you today, when you got out of your car, you locked it and the alarm was turned on. And never in a million years would you leave your car unlocked. And you say, well, so for me, when a company says to us, well, nothing's happened to us so far, so I think we're good. I mean, we've been running on this system for a while, and we've got our firewall, we're good to go. And that would be, to me, just like saying, well, I left my car unlocked for the last 2 years and no one's stolen it. And I even went to 16th Street Mall. We're good. We're good. No, we're all good. So the reason I show you all of those statistics and all of that information is really, you know, a lot of people say, well, if Target gets hacked, the government can potentially get hacked, and they put millions and billions of dollars into it. You know, what can I do? How am I going to stop that? And truly, what you can do at the end of the day is you can't throw your hands up. You have to make yourself a harder target. So I have my little picture of Target. And I always, after doing these presentations, I always wonder when someone's looking at my history, because obviously it logs all my history on the internet, and say, Melanie was searching for red Target pictures and running bear pictures. I'm sure they think that's really strange. But you can make yourself a harder target. And I'm going to, the reason I have the bear up there is because what we like to say to small companies is it's kind of like the old joke about the bear. So if you're in the woods and a bear is chasing you and the other guy, you don't have to run faster than the bear, you just have to run faster than the other guy. So at the end of the day, that's what you want to do. You want to make yourself a harder target and be proactive. So one of the things I want to say, I'm not trying to scare you with all these statistics. I'm really just trying to let you be aware that you should be prepared and proactive in your defenses, and basically how important it is to understand cybersecurity and why it's critical for your business. So, and 3 specific things you can do to make yourself a harder target, and one thing that you should be doing to account for the fact that you could be breached. So the first thing you need to do to make yourself a harder target within your company is anomaly detection. And I'll go into a little bit of detail here. So do you have anomaly detection on your network? So if you think of your network like your home, so the exterior of the house, your exterior of your house and your door locks are kind of like rain, keeps out the rain, keeps out the bugs, maybe an unwanted in-law or two. And that's kind of like your firewall, your antivirus, and your passwords. So that's just your basic perimeter defense. So, but actually the bad news is a determined hacker can get through that exterior and gain access to your network and your data. Because on average, a hacker will live in your network 180 days undetected. So you have to look for subtle anomalies. Oh, wow, sorry. You have to look for subtle anomalies. So for example, what this detection does, if Sarah's computer is scanning all the other computers in the office at 3 a.m., it shouldn't be doing that. So Sarah works from 8 to 5, and her computer actually shouldn't be scanning anyone else's computer. And so without anomaly detection and without the ability to see what's going on your network, you're not able to see that that's happening. Or another example would be, well, why is the new intern's computer, why is that computer downloading HR files? And by the way, how did the intern get access to the HR files? And so what the anomaly detection does, it learns, it not only detects a breach in real time, but it also learns the behavior of employees. And so if Sarah's there from 8 to 5, and all of a sudden her computer starts scanning at 3 in the morning, it's gonna alert to that. So the big thing for you to do is to ask, am I confident that my organization could detect a breach before it's too late? And the only way you can actually detect a breach outside of the perimeter is actually that anomaly detection. It's actually called a SIM. It's a Security Information and Event Monitor, and it's logging everything on the network. So while I'm being specific about anomalies and detecting that so that you can find those hackers that are going undetected in your network, it actually is pretty comprehensive. It does a whole lot more than that. Let's say you fired an employee and you're not sure what they were doing for the last month. You could actually pull up everything they did on their computer for the last month and determine files they downloaded, files they copied, any of that type of information. And if you wanted to, but you could also, for our financial firms, that anomaly detection is important for the SEC regulations in terms of having all of those logs and proof that if there were any data issues that those have been dealt with. You have a question?
So if you do detect that the new intern's computer is scanning the other ones, do you confront him or her? Or? So
there are a couple of ways. So the actual software, depending on how you set up the controls, actually will shut down. You can have it shut down the act itself. However, we do have companies that are up and running 24/7, especially if they're a firm that doesn't want to shut down. So there are options to shut down just that computer, I believe. Starting to get a little technical on me, but Dane, is that correct?
So it doesn't necessarily mean the intern's a crook.
No, this absolutely does not mean the intern is a crook. So what typically has happened is someone through social engineering or has gained access to the network with an authenticated user. So someone has gotten that intern's password or maybe they've clicked on a link that's allowed them a gateway into your network. And they've gotten into your network, and now they're moving about undetected because they're posing as the intern, or they're moving about undetected because they're posing as Sarah. And that is why with the anomaly detection software, you're actually able to detect that, because now, even though they're currently undetected, now that you can see that movement, you can say, hey, wait a minute, or those algorithms will actually determine.
To gain access, is it mostly social engineering, or now, or is it actually finding things?
Yeah, so social engineering was, so I've in one of my upcoming slides, I have the top 5 ways that companies are actually hacked. Social engineering actually makes up probably 75%. So it's a big part of it. Now, keep in mind that social engineering is not just, so sometimes people think, oh, social engineering, so that could be maybe getting someone's password. It's not just about password, and we'll go into some different ways that people socially engineer into your network. The hackers are still out there, but there's a lot of really good perimeter defenses now that companies put up that's what we call your basic line of defense, your security 1.0. And so what we're talking about today is really security 2.0. It's that next level to try to defend against that type of social engineering hack, which is the way most hackers are trying to get in, because if they can run around your network for that long pretending to be someone else, they can actually escalate their privileges. And what they're doing is they're looking for the best payout, the most financial gain from your network. So the longer they can be on your network without being detected, the better it is for them. And that's the whole reason why my number one to make yourself a harder target is for anomaly detection. Because you want to be sure that if you can't see it, you can't detect it. So, and this is where a lot of companies actually, they don't have it. And so they're not going to know that is happening at 3 a.m. if they're not looking at that on their network. And so as a company, we do have anomaly detection software. And so it also helps with our, it's basically an enterprise platform, but it's affordable for small companies as well. So even though I just said the intern's not a crook, 59% of employees actually steal corporate or proprietary data from companies when they are quit or fired. So that's another thing the detection and event monitoring provides. It provides the ability to know what your employees are doing, so including if they've taken certain files or databases. So I actually have an example of this. So we actually had someone come to us, and they had a contractor who basically downloaded their entire server, all the entire company, to his Google OneDrive. So they actually came to us and said, hey, we want to go back on our network, and we want to look at not only, we know this happened, but we want to know exactly what happened. We want it step by step, and we need it for the attorneys. So just so you know, we can't go back in time. So, and that's why it's so important to be proactive. So the information event monitoring starts, and that anomaly detection starts learning and logging on your network the minute it's installed, but we can't go backwards. We can't go back in time. So at that point, it falls into a forensic area. A harder target is culture. Does your company have a culture that cybersecurity is important? And I'll give you some examples, but ultimately the CEO sets the tone and determines the culture, and it's critical because employees, speaking to your question about social engineering, employees are the biggest risk factor in any company, period. It's the human factor. And what we found so PwC, their 2015 Global State of Information Survey, 75% of directors were not involved in the cybersecurity risk process. And that's a problem. So at the end of the day, the executive team, it needs to come top down. The executives, managers, owners, doesn't matter if you have 1 or 1,000, they need to be involved and knowledgeable about they're involved and knowledgeable about sales and revenue, so they need to be just as involved and knowledgeable about your cybersecurity plan. And the biggest reason is social engineering.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What's the official definition of social engineering?
Yeah. So the official definition is utilizing personal information to.
So it's not just email?
It's not. No, it's not just email. I'm going to go into 5 different types of social engineering, but the list goes on and on. So when you say what's the official definition, it's any personal identifiable information, or PII, that can be used to gain access to your network. And it may not be able to gain access to your network. It could be gain access to a file to give them access to some other network. So it's just the use of your social information to gain access to something you're not supposed to have access to, basically. So the most common ways companies are breached is, we talked about malware, 317 new pieces a year, hacking, social engineering, physical. I left this quote up here because it's really interesting. It says, so many times the Chinese and others get access to our systems just by pretending to be someone else and asking for access. And someone gives it to them. So that's what Clapper said. That was an article on the White House hack in April of 2015. That's when the Russians hacked the State Department. And so, and they found that, you know, this quote obviously is talking about more than one scenario. But as far as social engineering goes, sometimes it's not a big investigative thing. Sometimes people just call and ask. And if you haven't put in place policies and procedures at your company and maybe some security awareness training, people aren't, they're just not looking for it. I mean, as a society or as a culture, we're typically pretty trusting. And if someone tells you they're the IT person and they need the information, typically you're going to give it out. And that's why we always recommend and provide employee cybersecurity training and awareness. And we also have where we actually do mock trials where we try to call, get the information, and see what type of information the employees will give out. And then of course the physical. Physical obviously is walking in and taking it. So one of the, and no, ransomware does not have two E's in it, so I just want you to know that autocorrect has failed me much like Siri does on a regular basis. So I want to take a look at a recent ransomware attack. As a company, we get a lot of questions about ransomware. Obviously, everyone's scared to death about getting locked out and having to pay money. This particular example is going to be the medical industry, healthcare industry. However, just know I could spend all day, it doesn't really matter what industry. I could give you examples all day long in any industry. But you may have heard of this. This was in the news, about 6 months ago. The Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center in Los Angeles. So their computer systems were offline for more than a week following a ransomware attack. They were totally locked out. So with the hackers demanding how much in payment, does anybody know how much in payment they wanted? They wanted $3.6 million. So what they did is they spent a whole week trying to unlock, and they couldn't do it. I mean, it's locked down, so ransomware is pretty tight. Does anyone know how much the hospital ended up paying? And this will go back to your question about how much a breach cost. So they ended up paying $17,000. So on the surface, that looks like, wow, that's wonderful. They paid 17 grand after 3.5 million. But actually the costs were astronomical. From the patients to the employees to the week they were down, they couldn't do MRIs, they couldn't access patient health records. And no matter what industry you're in, if you're down for a week, it's going to cripple your business. And if you're a small business, it could put you out of business. But me personally, I always wonder, and this really doesn't have anything to do with cybersecurity, but I'm like, well, how do you pay a criminal and they not get caught? I always wonder that. So I've added this. So they were actually demanding bitcoins. They're actually demanding 9,000 bitcoins for 3.5, 3.6 million, depending on the day you look at the value of Bitcoin, to release the system. But it appears that it was negotiated down to 40 only little bitcoins, which is equal to around $17,000. Yes?
The question would be, what percentage of the hackers are actually caught?
What percentage of the hackers are actually caught? That is a statistic I do not know. But since, actually, it's interesting that you, yes, definitely. The original hackers who hacked into Lowe's POS system, so those guys were caught. They figured out what happened with Target.
There's 10 million hacks a day,
Attempts. They didn't get in.
How many are successful of the 10 million?
Of the 10 million, well, the nuclear energy department did not tell me that, but typically, a generic statistic would be that they are about 80% of the time, roughly. Because what happens is, but with small companies, it gets higher. So it depends on what we're talking about, small or large companies. So if you're talking about a small company, they're probably successful closer to 90% of the time. And it depends on what you define as a successful hack. And that's why you need the anomaly detection. So a successful hack could be they just got in the door, but were they actually able to take anything? Because if you have anomaly detection on your network and they got in the door, but you had some defenses in place and you shut down your network where they couldn't access any more information, then technically you were successfully hacked, but they didn't get away with a lot of data. So you would still fall in that high percentage of, hey, yeah, they got in the door, but we spotted them, we stopped them, we shut them down.
So what percentage of the people who actually get the data are actually caught?
I don't have that, I don't know.
there's really no way to know because it's worldwide. So you could have people over in Kazakhstan get picked up for hacking, and you would not, there'd be never a way to know that. So there's really kind of a hard statistic to come up with.
Right, and depending on the company and where they're based out of and their requirements for reporting a breach, you may or may not be able to have that statistic if they're not on the list as well. But I can tell you that these particular hackers were not caught, and that was one of the reasons I was curious is how do they not get caught if you're actually having to pay them money? And it was through Bitcoin, and so for all of the non-believers, Bitcoin is a real currency, and I'm sure they spent their $17,000 very quickly.
Are we moving towards a worldwide agency to monitor these things, to catch these people?
Well, as far, you mean for criminal? For criminal prosecution?
$148 million or whatever it is from Target.
Yeah.
How do they find them?
Now, well, I can tell you statistically, the U.S. is the highest percentage out of, if you combine, if you look at all the countries individually, and I didn't include this slide today, if you look at all the countries individually, the U.S. is the highest percentage of actually on the receiving end of those attacks. So they do target the U.S. more than any other country, but that's by design because we have the most wealth. So getting back to your question about social engineering, so on the social network engineering, so not just social engineering, but now we're talking about specifically social network engineering. This is not an all-inclusive list. The list is going to go on and on. But of course, the big one that everyone talks about is Facebook. So I'm going to beg all of you to go. I know you know that Facebook, you can shut down your privacy and those things, but go ahead and take a look at what's going on with your Facebook privacy. The first thing that people will typically do is go try to get access to the executives of the company, and they're going to go take a look at their profile, because what they can do is look at your information on Facebook, then they just call up to the company, and it sounds like they know the person. I mean, they know your dog's name, they know your kids go to school, they know a lot of information. So you really want to lock down your social media accounts and the photos as well, because that gives a lot of information. So I'm always telling my daughter, I try. She's going on 12. She does not have a Facebook account, thank goodness, but we've given in to Snapchat. It was bad. So the next is phishing. Obviously phishing, everyone's, so obviously tricking someone into clicking on a link they think is an actual legitimate website. So there's all different versions of phishing. And I have some examples that I'll bring up here on another slide when we get to it. But we had a company that they lost $100,000. They contacted us after to help them implement some new policies and procedures. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then there's TikTok, obviously convincing someone. This is a big one. So a lot of people, keep in mind that when you hear all these examples that I give, and we go through all these different scenarios of scams, that all of the people who fall victim to this are smart, intelligent, hardworking professionals, just like yourself. So we have a room full of smart people, and at the end of the day, the hackers, they've just gotten really sophisticated at their abilities to social engineer. And then relationships, former employee, ex-spouse. I don't think there's any explanation needed on that one. And then piggybacking, this happens actually at the larger companies where they just follow someone right in the door. I know there's a lot of wealth management firms, they actually keep their doors locked specifically, and it would be difficult to follow someone in. So really, I'm going into all these details about social engineering, but this is the part two, the second thing you can do to make yourself a harder target, and that is to be sure you have a culture of awareness and training from the top down, from the executives of the owner all the way down. Otherwise, the employees aren't looking for it. And, if they're more aware and they know that that's important and that there could be an issue with their livelihood otherwise, then they'll be more apt to pay attention to it. So I have a little video here. So social engineering can be sophisticated, but sometimes it can be super easy.
We've been hearing a lot about cybersecurity lately, largely because of what happened to Sony. Companies and individuals are more concerned about the safety and privacy of their information than ever. President Obama has unveiled a number of new proposals this week to crack down on hackers, and he plans to address this in the State of the Union speech on Tuesday. And it's great that the government is working on this, but the truth of the matter is we need to do a better job of protecting ourselves. You know, the most popular password in the United States is password 123. And as long as that's the case, we're vulnerable. So today we sent a camera out on the Hollywood Boulevard to help people by asking them to tell us their password. And this is how that went.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a 12 Papillon.
And what's his name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where did you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. And you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So like a password of yours would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1?
Like my birthday.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th.
What year were you born?
95.
Oh, great. So Jolie, 6, 12, 95. Got it.
So you mean to give my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 468. And then Israel. It's only 3, but it's, you know, it's for me it's strong enough.
Ireland, 1, 2, 3, 4. Gemma, 1, 2, 3. Spelled G-E-M-M-A. So most of them are Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so like
what's a good Italian password?
my grandma's name.
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
Oh yeah, now you know my password.
Well, the important thing is they learn a terrible lesson.
So that one's fun. So obviously passwords, this is why employee training is really important. So, and another reason on the culture being important is, you know, we talk about social engineering, but this one's actually an interesting one. So there was an international cybercrime ring that was based out of Eastern Europe, and so they stole $1 billion in 2 years from 100 different banks in 30 countries. So, and all they used was spearfishing from bank employees. And so we typically think of a bank as being very secure. I know I personally can't figure out how to get my email from Wells Fargo, but there are two-factor authentication. I think it's pretty secure, but this spearfishing technique actually is currently the most successful on the internet today. Yes?
Does that include the SWIFT, you know, that's been in the media the last couple of days? The Society for International Payments?
No, this was actually, that's not that recent. I did hear about that.
That was yesterday.
Yeah. I'm pretty current on my slides, but not that current. I try. So getting back, and really the manufacturing firm in Denver that contacted us about employees borrowing the $100,000 that we're helping with their policies and procedures, we actually, you know, again, hardworking, she doing the company, pretty devastated that she had wired that amount of money, but the email was very sophisticated. It looked like it was coming from the owner. It was in the same type of verbiage that the owner would use. She had no reason to be, in her mind, suspicious of it, other than with policies and procedures in place, regardless of whether you're suspicious or not. We work with executives to determine there should never be one email and then an action taken. There should be a policy in place where there's some, you know, just like with the passwords of two-factor authentication, that you should also have some two-factor for those type of things as well. So obviously if you're wiring that kind of money, But again, it was sophisticated, it wasn't out of place. So the good news is the company will survive. The bad news is the $100,000 was not recoverable. So social media, hackers' favorite target. So 600,000 Facebook accounts are compromised every single day. So I'm sure you've gotten a request from a friend on Facebook that you're already friends with. And so that someone has hacked their account and they're duplicating their account. And so my recommendation is always, and this happens with LinkedIn as well. Has anybody gotten a fake LinkedIn request? Yeah. And so that's usually malware. But if you get any request in your email from Facebook or LinkedIn, just delete those, and then just delete them, and then go to your actual LinkedIn application, your actual Facebook application, and look for those requests there. So with LinkedIn, it'll be there. So I always delete those, just as a recommendation. And the other thing is, just as a company, so what's your policy on social media access? So this goes back to the culture at your company. You know, what's your policy? Do you know that people are accessing their social media accounts while at work? What's your policy? What type of access do you allow for that? So another reason, so including staying up to date. So it's important to let your IT know. Well, I'm sure your IT does know this, but it's important for both your IT and your employees to know the critical awareness of software updates. So 99% of computers are vulnerable to exploit kits if they're out of date. So if I use the house comparison again, if a burglar knows that with a certain security system that particular version of security system never alerts if the back left window of your house doesn't trip the alarm, then they're just going to target that security system and they're going to enter all those houses undetected through that back left window. It's kind of what happens with the security holes in outdated software versions. So you want to keep those versions up to date for your own security inspection. And again, if you have any really technical questions about this, I know I promised not to do a technical discussion today so that it would be a more interesting and easily understood presentation, but don't hesitate to ask questions after the presentation. So as a company, we're certified engineers with Sophos, and we're a partner with them, and I love some of their videos, and I think you'll find it humorous, but this just gives you some insight into employees and kind of their mindset.
I will download suspicious software.
I will download suspicious attachments.
I will download suspicious apps.
If there were a button that said download malware, I'd click it. I'll download malware.
Like the plague. I'll download the plague.
And email it to everyone.
I will visit suspicious websites. Gambling.
Pornography.
BitTorrents. FreeStreamingMovies.com. FreeLicenseCodes.com.
FreeNuclearCodes.com.
I've just ended up on a watchlist.gov.
ExpensiveLawsuit.com/ we're all going to prison.
I will help that Nigerian prince transfer some money.
He's a prince for crying in the night. He needs some help.
And in return, he's gonna help me out. We're gonna be friends.
We might even get married.
I love meeting new people.
If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is true.
I don't even know where Nigeria is. I think it, yeah, I don't know.
I will lose my smartphone.
My tablet?
My laptop.
On an airplane. In a taxi. In my hotel. In Thailand.
And Target. I was swimming and blogging. And then I was just swimming. I will be unable to configure my email software.
Oh, no.
Even if you tell me how to do it.
I won't even be listening.
I'll be thinking about other things.
Machine guns.
Puppies.
Clowns, the Crimean War.
The long-term effects of chloroform.
A goat.
I will need your help. A lot.
So that's a fun little video. My favorite part is the long-term effects of chloroform. I'm not sure why that's funny to me. But, so as Sophos partners and engineers, so the reason I show this to you is just to kind of highlight the importance of policies, procedures, employee training, all the things we do. Obviously, you're going to have perimeter defenses, multiple devices, but without the culture and to make yourself a harder target so that your employees don't have this culture, that can definitely help prevent you becoming the target of a breach. So the third thing you can do to make yourself a harder target is all about the data. So this one's pretty straightforward. So what's your critical data? Where is it? And who has access to it? It's on who has access to it. So one of the first things we do as a company, we go out and do a cyber review, and we do a full scan of the network and look at all the users who have access and what they have access to. And I've yet to find, well, I've yet to come across, in 99% of the cases, to where we'll have an old login from an employee that has been gone a year, 2 years, and they'll still be having credentials that can give them access to the network. So no one's updated that or looked at that. And it also shows us on that same report, the last time they logged in. So the good news is, many times they were fired 2 years ago, 2 years ago. They still have a login, but they haven't logged in 2 years. So that's the good news. The bad news is that really shouldn't be happening. So if you're being proactive and you really want your data and your network to be secure, you need to be looking at all those things. Because you can't secure it unless you know what it is, where it is, and who has access to it. The other part on where it is on all the copies, so as an executive or an owner, you should also know a lot of executives that we speak to actually don't know where their data resides. And so you need to know where that is, all copies of it, because I guarantee you there's more than one copy. So as a company, so what we do when we go out, we do the actual cybersecurity review. We actually do an on-site consult, so we take a look, and then we do the scan, determining who, what, and where your data is. So we do have a cybersecurity experts that will consult and go over that, and then we do third-party recommendations and a future roadmap. So that's kind of where we start with all the companies. Obviously we actually specialize in, we developed a proprietary software for SEC, OCIE regulation and compliance. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say the word regulation. It's a governance. It is not officially a regulation yet. However, if the auditors walk in your doors, most of you know they will still be looking for that information. So we actually developed a proprietary plan. So we do have a lot of financial firms that follow that comprehensive plan. It all starts with that cybersecurity review, but then we have a full annual plan that goes quarterly. So, but kind of going back over it, so I promised you 3 things to significantly reduce your risk of being breached. And number 1 was that anomaly detection software. And I didn't bore you with charts and graphs of exactly what that software does, but if you're interested in that, I can email that to you. And then does your company have a culture that cybersecurity is important? And so we kind of went through all the social engineering, and the anomaly detection software can help you with that. And then all about the data. So I know when I say, know what it is, where it is, and who has access to it, that sounds very simple. But you would be surprised that we literally meet with executives every day that can't answer those 3 questions. Or they're not sure, they just want to say, well, we want everything to be critical. Well, not everything's critical. Yes, we're going to back it all up, we're going to secure it all, but we need to know where your critical ones are and put them on a tighter lockdown. So all those things will significantly reduce your risk, but you also have to consider the fact that you may still be breached. And it's important that you determine that you're prepared for a breach. And so you want to be prepared, proactive, and you want to train and exercise. Yes?
With a significant move to the cloud, is the cloud more secure than previously or less secure?
That is an excellent question. I'm going to let Dane answer that because actually that is the question we get a lot. And I do want a little more of a technical answer for that because it's an important question.
So it depends on how you're using the cloud. There's 3 types, there's 3 ways to use the cloud. There's PaaS, which is platform as a service. There's what we call IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service. And then there's software as a service. So it really depends on what you're, where you're going to different, whether you're using infrastructure as a service to say whether something's more secure or less secure. Software as a service is all dependent based on your vendor. So you have to have and understand what your vendor is doing for cybersecurity, and you have to pick your vendor based on how they're protecting your data. With infrastructure as a service, it's just like any other server sitting on your local network, and then platform as a service is actual software development. So
it depends. You want to pick a vendor who has services over and above what you yourself are doing.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. And in fact, during our annual plan, we do a vendor review where we go through and we see the contracts that you've signed with software as a service, and we evaluate those and say, hey, are we in a good position? Are we in a bad position? You know, what are we doing here? You know, and we have to look at that.
Yep. So one of the things to note here, so the simple act of actually preparing a training as an exercise for a breach will actually, that ongoing training will actually make you more secure. So it's top of mind, it's awareness, and reduce your risk of being breached. But you need to have a playbook and templates. So in the middle of a crisis is not the time to try to figure out, well, what do we do now? So, and the other part of it too is depending on how proactive you were, depends on how potentially disastrous or not disastrous the breach has become. So we do CISO consulting, and we help companies prepare and train for a breach. So going back to that 100,000 that firm lost, so 68% of funds lost as a result of a cyber attack are actually unrecoverable. So in looking at this slide, my advice would be, I really don't, as a company, I don't want to be figuring out if my funds are recoverable or not recoverable. I want them not to be taken. So that's when I just want to reinforce the idea of policies and procedures and really looking at your cybersecurity posture and what you have going on, where you're vulnerable, because that's the first step. You just don't want it to happen. So some companies, depending on their size, we have enterprise-grade solutions that are actually affordable, though, for small companies. And typically, we'll go through the process. However, we're not here to replace the IT team. So many of the companies we work with have IT personnel and IT teams in place, and we actually will go in and augment or work with them. And so we'll work with the executives, and depending on how many things need to be done at that company, how large the company is, we may do the cybersecurity implementation in phases, or it may be one phase. We may only do the review. So it just depends on how much the IT team wants to take on or not take on, and how much they're investing and how proactive they want to be, because every company has a different level of acceptable risk that they're willing to take. So some people don't lock their cars, other people have, motion sensors. Just
Along
depends.
that line, do you work with business lines, or is it just usually with IT? Or?
So we work with small to mid-sized companies, and so some of the companies are small, they actually don't have an IT team, and then some of the companies, that they already have IT personnel inside, and we work directly with them. But we always start with the executives. We actually, it is top-down, so we work with the management team and with the executives, and IT comes into play. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's where you start.
Yeah. We always start with management because they need to be on board and proactive, and they need to be looking at their current cybersecurity posture and what they need to do, and it's important. So, I mentioned that we specialize in cybersecurity compliance for financial firms. We have the proprietary one, but we actually have companies that are not SEC regulated that they still pick the SEC plan because it's so comprehensive and detailed. Not every company needs that level, a whole 4-quarter plan, or they may not have so many employees that they want to initiate a full employee training. So they'll just do maybe the initial cybersecurity review and go from there depending on how that report turns out. That report on the initial cybersecurity review is usually shocking to most of management whenever we present that. We have the annual cybersecurity plan, which is obviously for all industries, but we have a specialized one for SEC, and then we have a generic one. And then the security information and event monitoring is the anomaly detection software that I mentioned. So that's the main ones. Not on this list is obviously employee training. We do have a platform as part of our employee training that will send mock phishing emails, and if you click on it, of course it'll pop up and say you just clicked on a phishing email, and it sends those reports back to management. and tells them who clicked on it, how many they sent 5 that week. They clicked on 3 out of 5. You know, Sarah clicked on 5 out of 5, and Joe clicked on 1 out of 5. And the good news is about that is as you continue to do it, the percentages continue to go up. And that actually starts to create that culture that I was talking about. And if people are actually looking for that, they're not so click happy. So on our website, if you go to 24unit.com, and any of you in this room can go to 24unit.com and download a free guide. And that is, so if you're not sure your business is targeted for cyber breach, you can just go there and download it and take those tips and use them to your advantage. So.
Is this a test? Is that malware?
No, it is not a test. It is not a test. So no, that's an actual white paper that we have that's available to you on our website. And if you have all your perimeter defenses in place and your antivirus and your anti-malware running and in current version, you'll be A-okay to download that. So if y'all have any other questions, I thank you for your time. Hopefully I've given you some information maybe you weren't aware of before, and hopefully provided some help to make you be a harder target and not run faster than the bear with the other guy. So thank you for your time. Do y'all have any technical questions?
What's kind of the range of costs? I mean, are we talking $5,000, $100,000? Where do most small companies kind of fall in for this?
So for our cybersecurity review where we come out, so up to 20 employees, that starts at $795. So then you can just get a basic overview, which is very reasonable. And then obviously it goes up from there. So $795 and up from there. The annual plans, I'm really going to do the base, but just to let you know, so within the annual plans there are like the Anomaly Detection software, which is an added and extra cost. But for the base plan, it starts at $4,000 a quarter and up.
What do you recommend for plan of action whenever you're targeted? There's a lot of phone call phishing type scams out there where they act as your Microsoft, you've got files, you know, and it's so funny how many times they call at you. But you know, whenever it's just they're targeting me, you know, it feels so small to call the FBI to try and track these down, to try and help the agencies out there that are phishing, that are looking for these predators. What do you recommend doing besides just searching for the best Yo Mama joke and you know?
Well, yeah, and so my first thought that comes to my mind whenever you ask that is obviously the biggest concern is protecting obviously the company you're working for, and or your company, and your policies and procedures and how to handle that. So as a company and as a culture, you're going to put policies and procedures in place for precisely that. If someone calls, how are you going to handle it? And every executive team is different on how they want to handle that. You know, some policies may be that you just, you know, obviously don't give out the information and hang up. Other policies may include that you log it and you keep it as part of your log. And then the third policy, obviously, if you want to go back and report it, you would have to have a phone system that would allow you to, you know, what information are you going to actually report if you do decide it. I actually wouldn't recommend. I think you're going to be spending a lot of time and not getting anywhere. So my recommendation is, unless it was severe enough, and you'd have to decide that in policies and procedures that you wouldn't actually report that, you would just be sure that the employees weren't giving out that information and following the procedure.
So there's yet to be any type of agency that fields these types of, you know, I know I'm being scammed, I'm not going to fall for it, but, you know, who can I report this to give them a lead on, you know, these
so
black hats out there.
There are threat vector databases, which is what we call them out there. The FBI has one, and I can't remember the name of it right off the tip of my head, but if you Google that, I'm sure you can find it. And then there's also a private one, I think, that Symantec or Sophos or a couple of those type of people operate as well. And then you also have the CVEs, which are the critical vectors that are what we look for vulnerability testing. So those are already known. So if you find something on your computer, something that's already known, you may want to check that out first before you actually report it, because it may already be a known thing.
Right. And if you want to leave me your card, I'll be happy to forward some information to you. But yeah, two different things. So the known threats, so you've got you were speaking specifically to phone calls, and really there's such a large database for the digital known threats that they as they're known, they continually update that database automatically. So that's pretty interesting. But leave me your card, and I'll send you as much information as we can. Any other questions? Thank you. Yeah, 15 minutes, yay.
That's why I don't like social media. And I get
Best thing to do is go back to the old way and use it by pen and pencil.
I do. As long as I know that you're here. That's how I do it.
Just want to check.
Although my board thinks to do those off.
We actually specialize.
Sorry.